Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be about a slightly different topic than the ones I usually discuss in my channel, because the idea for this video actually came about during a conversation with a friend of mine, in which we were discussing, rather playful, in a playful manner, whether the whole thing about men becoming more valuable as they get older is actually true or not. And for me, this is a very interesting topic for many reasons, including some of those I will talk about here, but especially because I believe that there is an increasingly larger portion of men who are feeling themselves not being appreciated enough, or actually wondering if they are good enough to face the challenges we all come across over the course of our lives. And so my purpose here basically is to give these people another perspective and ultimately hope that they can somehow hold on and also realize their full potential. And so this video is actually something that I can somehow give some hope and provide some value to these people so that they can actually turn their situations around and ultimately fulfill what they want in life and their full potential. But onto the topic itself, in my opinion, the reason people say that men tend to appreciate and value as they age, and conversely, because this also comes attached, women tend to lose value over time as they age as well, is actually because the characteristics that each of them have and which are most desired by the opposite sex. You see, it's not whether people become better or worse, it's become of the characteristics that each sex has that are valued by the opposite one. And so I believe that this is the culprit, or the crux of the actual issue. And so, just to give you an example, we know that from a biological and historical perspective, women tend to prefer men that are older than them because, among other things, these men tend to be more emotionally mature and supportive later on as they age. They tend to be also financially more stable and secure, and as a result, they are seen as most likely a better parent, and they are able to provide a good example and a good education for their offspring. Now, as we know, most men tend to attain these characteristics as they reach, usually, this is on average, of course, their mid to late 30s and 40s. And so it's rather normal that women perceive older men as being more desirable and even more valuable in that respect. And so not only these characteristics tend to be more and more prevalent as men venture into their late 40s, sometimes even into their late 50s, and in some cases into their 60s. So now, on the flip side, and also for biological reasons, men tend to prefer women that are still in their fertile age. They are emotionally stable, available, supportive, and I would say also, yes, it's true. I believe it's completely true. Make no mistake about it, that men place a higher premium on women, on the way that women looks, that actually the other way around. Women do not place as much value on a man's looks than men put on women's looks. And so, as we all know, the ability for most women actually to conceive, as we know, starts to decline as as they move into their 30s, and so it can be said that men may start to regard them as less desirable by that point. However, and I'm also very convinced that even though women's fertility starts to decline with age, their emotional maturity and stability continues to increase over time, even as they age. And so for some men, this upside may be actually much more important than the downside that comes with a lesser ability to bear children. Now, there is one very important point that I want to make, because I do not see this being discussed in relative terms between both genders. But it is possible, of course, that my perspective may be a little bit biased here. But this is what my experience tells me, basically. As we know, men tend to reach emotional maturity later than women. So they tend to consider a bit less the long-term consequences of their actions than women. And especially during their teenage years and even during their early adulthood years, when sometimes they take action and they make decisions by impulse rather than thinking about the long-term implications of those decisions. But on the flip side, women feel themselves in a more vulnerable position because of their status in society and because, of course, an historical background that they carry, of course, over the centuries past. And by being emotionally more mature earlier on, they tend to be very careful and much less impulsive in certain key decisions in their lives, such as, for example, choosing the right partner for them and the right father for their children, as the costs and potentially the grief that will bear on them if they make the wrong decision is invariably higher than on men if they are in a similar situation and they make a wrong decision. And so I guess it is quite clear that for everyone, that in general, we still live in a society that is still dominated by men. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it's just the way it is. And because of that, men tend to have access to more and better quality opportunities in terms of their career, compensation, advancement, and the ability to stand out in society. But, and this is very important, men also tend to fall victims more often from, I would say, lack of direction in their lives, lack of an authority figure, and also tend to be more influenced by not so well-intended friends. Well, I should not say well-intended friends or be friends after all. Let's call them associates instead of friends, because they are not actually friends. But these are probably some of the reasons why men tend to be a little bit more alienated. Some men, not all of them, but some men tend to be more alienated from the communities they live in and from society in general. And this situation is probably one of the explanations why suicide rates, for example, among young men have been increasing over the past few years, because they feel like they are not worth anything, and so they have no direction. They feel hopeless, and might as well end their lives, which is super sad, of course. And but in any case, as a result of these differences, I believe that if we could make, and this is something that, of course, I imagine if it could be possible, which is something very difficult, but if we could somehow make an experience in which we have two separate groups, one only of random teenage men and another one of random teenage women, and we monitor their lives and their life outcomes over a period of 30, 40 years even, I am convinced that the variability, the dispersion of outcomes would be larger among the men than among the women. In other words, these men, among this group of men, teenage men, some of them would become extremely, extremely successful in their lives in terms of their career, their finances, their relationships, and so on. But there would be also another sizable proportion of men that unfortunately would end up very badly in those exact same aspects, and even other aspects of their lives. Now, on the other hand, in the case of women, I'm sure that, of course, between the members, among the members of this group, would be, of course, some disparity in terms of the outcomes, but not as great. The level of dispersion, the number of outliers in this group in terms of success would be much smaller than in the case of men. And the most likely explanation I can find for this difference is that women in general, because they tend to have access to fewer career advancement opportunities, they tend to have lower compensation in their job roles, which of course impairs their chances of reaching higher levels of success comparable to successful men, to most comparable to most successful men. But on the flip side, their superior levels of maturity and the ability, or a greater ability, relatively greater ability, to avoid very bad decisions, they make the least successful women probably more successful than the least successful of men, you see. And so once again, I believe that my perspective may be a little bit biased, but it's also a byproduct of my life experience, because as most of you know, most of my followers know, I've been living and working in several countries across Europe, and I spent a lot of time walking around, getting to know the places I lived in, connecting with local communities, always commuting and sightseeing using public transportation, and so on. So I like to get the feeling of the place and the people who I'm surrounding myself with in terms of the community. However, for me, it has been increasingly more concerning what is going on with, I would say, a lot of young men in their teenage years, early adulthood years that I've been witnessing. Of course, I'm convinced that these cases are nowhere near the majority of the young men, but I've seen so many of these people on almost a daily basis, like doing nothing but, for example, smoking weed, filling themselves up with alcohol, yelling out in the open in the middle of the street, yelling profanities to each other, being absolutely transfixed, glued to their smartphones, listening to music out loud in buses and trains, and even other things that I cannot say in here. But I mean, one does not need to be a genius to realize that these men have a very low chance of finding a woman who see these young men as a viable partner. And so these men really lack someone to give them some guidance towards having some worthy purpose in their lives. And this is absolutely critical, because we are talking about a significant group of, unfortunately, broken people who will be adults someday. And if somehow they end up having children, having kids, they will be responsible to pass on to those kids a proper set of morals and values, so that they carry on with their lives with as much success as possible. And I can only wonder how they will be able to do that if they continue to carry their lives this way. And so as final thoughts, I believe that men in general have the potential to become more desirable, more valued by women as they get older, because most of the characteristics they tend to get more of as they get older are among those that men appreciate more, that women appreciate more in men. In case of women, even though they may lose some perceived perceived value in the eyes of some men because their fertility levels decline with age. They are no longer fertile, so they can no longer bear children and all that. On the flip side, they are also able to offset some of that loss with because of their increasing maturity, and also their ability to provide some support to men as men face multiple challenges across their personal and professional lives. And so I believe that there can be a symbiosis of men and women, because in this case, because men and women have different characteristics. They are perceived by society in different ways, but I believe that the advantages that one gender may have relative to another may be compensated by the advantages that the other gender has. And in that sense, I'm a true believer that the problems that so many men, because the problems that I see mostly are with men, I believe that the problems that some broken men have, I believe if they want to, if they really believe they can do something about it, they are still well on time to be happy and to turn their lives around. And this is something that I am strongly convinced about. But yeah, basically that's it. Let me know in the comments below your views and remarks on this topic. I find this super interesting. Once again, I need to repeat this because this is something that it matters to all of us ultimately, because at the end of the day, our children will also face some of these people, some of these influences, and so it's important for them to get a full understanding of what is better for them, what is not good for them, and so they should avoid those kind of exposures to make sure they can be as happy and successful as possible. But that's it. Feel free to like the video, subscribe, leave your comments below as well, of course, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions and you would like to further discuss this topic. I'll see you all on the next video.